Your tomatoes never reach the size you see in expert photos, and there's a scientific reason behind that. Sucker pruning combined with intensive trellising can increase your fruit size by 25 to 30%, advance your harvest by up to 3 weeks, and reduce fungal diseases 5 times more than traditional methods. None of this is magic, nor is it a secret that commercial farmers guard jealously. Universities like Cornell, Oregon State, Wisconsin, and Purdue have documented this agricultural science for decades. Today you're going to learn exactly how it works, why it works, and the mistakes most beginners make when trying to apply these techniques. Understanding why pruning works requires understanding how a tomato plant operates from the inside. Plants function as source and sink systems, where leaves produce sugars through photosynthesis, while fruits, roots, and growth points consume those sugars to develop. The problem appears when you let suckers grow unchecked, because they become additional sinks competing for the plant's energy. And according to research from the University of California, those suckers can divert between 25 and 30% of the energy that should be feeding your fruits. Delbert Hemphill, a researcher at Oregon State University, documented in his 1977 and 78 trials something many gardeners ignore. Dense, unpruned foliage forces many leaves to remain in permanent shade. His discovery was revealing because when a leaf uses more sugar than it produces, it eventually turns yellow and falls off, a diminishing return that nobody wants. Frontiers in Plant Science published a study in 2023 confirming that two-stem cultivation reduces fruit size and modifies quality, primarily because it decreases the capacity of fruits as sinks. The scientific conclusion points in one direction only. Pruning redirects photosynthates toward fewer fruits, but those fruits grow significantly larger. The hard data from controlled studies tells a clear story. Oregon State University conducted trials with early girl tomatoes in 1978, and the results surprised many. Pruned and staked plants produced fruits with an average weight of 141 grams, while unpruned plants reached only 109 grams, representing a 29% increase in size per fruit. And here's what changes everything. 53% of fruits from pruned plants ripened before August 31st, compared to just 35% in unpruned plants. 18 percentage points of difference in earliness that can make the difference between selling first or arriving late to market. Late blight incidence dropped to 7% in pruned plants versus 40% in unpruned ones. 5 times less disease with the same growing effort. Now comes the trade-off you need to know before making any decision. Unpruned plants in that same study produced 55 tons per acre of total yield versus 24 tons from pruned ones. Fewer fruits, yes, but each one significantly larger and higher quality. A 2018 study published in the International Journal of Vegetable Science tested planting densities between 16,000 and 30,000 plants per hectare. And the conclusion was clear for commercial operations, where hybrid seed cost and labor are determining factors. Unpruned or minimally pruned plants had the highest marketable yield per plant and per hectare. The right answer depends entirely on your goal. The most costly mistake gardeners make is applying the same technique to all tomatoes without distinguishing between types. Determinate tomatoes like Roma, San Marzano, and Celebrity are genetically programmed to stop growing at 3 to 4 feet tall, produce a terminal bud, and set all their fruit in a concentrated period of 3 to 4 weeks. Cornell University leaves no room for doubt. For determinate types, don't bother pruning because you'll only reduce your harvest. Iowa State Extension confirms that yields don't increase when removing suckers beyond the first flower cluster in determinate tomatoes. And that's information many gardeners learn too late. The only pruning consensus for determinates comes down to 2 actions. Remove suckers below the first flower cluster to strengthen the main stem, and remove leaves touching the soil to reduce disease transmission from splashing. Anything beyond that hurts your harvest. Indeterminate tomatoes like Big Boy, Brandywine, Cherokee Purple, Sun Gold, and Early Girl work completely differently because they continue growing and fruiting until frost and can reach 6 feet, 10 feet, or even more. These varieties respond well to pruning and need it to give their best. Wisconsin Extension puts it simply: remove suckers from indeterminate plants, except the sucker below the lowest flower cluster, and maintain active sucker pruning throughout the season as standard practice. The Florida weave system is documented in the University of Florida Extension publication and became the commercial standard in Florida and the Southeast United States for good reasons. The technique involves driving stakes 4 to 8 feet tall between every 2 or 3 plants, then weaving UV-resistant twine along both sides of the row, creating a sandwich that holds plants between parallel lines. Twine layers are added every 6 to 8 inches as plants grow, approximately every week, typically reaching 5 or 6 layers during the full season. The economic numbers speak for themselves. $104 for 6 rows with the Florida weave system versus $440 for equivalent coverage with cages. A 4-to-1 cost advantage that commercial farmers know well. Labor efficiency proves equally impressive because 15 plants can be strung in approximately 5 minutes, compared to 10 times longer for individual staking methods. Scientific Reports published a 2025 study from researchers at Debris Marcos University that found staked tomatoes using both single-string methods and Florida weave increased marketable yield by 18 to 25% compared to unstaked plants. Economic returns showed that staked production generated approximately 2.5 times more net profit than ground culture. The aeration benefits provided by pruning and trellising produce a measurable reduction in disease, and the mechanism behind this is fairly straightforward. Fungal pathogens require free water or relative humidity above 90% for spore germination, and good airflow dries foliage quickly, interrupting infection cycles before they begin. University of Minnesota Extension documents that early blight, one of the most common tomato and potato diseases occurring nearly every season, spreads when lower leaves come into contact with contaminated soil, either through direct contact or when raindrops splash soil onto leaves. Clemson Extension identifies leaf mold as something that appears first on old leaves near the soil, where air movement is poor and humidity remains high. Their recommendation is specific: staking and pruning to increase air circulation help control the disease effectively. Research indicates that pruning can increase total light absorption by 18% and reduce disease incidence by 27%, while Florida weave trellising allows 30% more light penetration through the canopy. Extension specialists consistently identify 6 pruning errors that reduce production instead of improving it, and they're worth knowing before you grab the shears. Over-pruning causes sun scald on fruits, leaving pale patches with whitish areas that eventually rot. The rule to remember: never remove more than 1/3 of a plant's total foliage at one time. Pruning at the wrong time also causes serious problems because doing it when it's raining or when plants are wet promotes the spread of bacterial and fungal diseases. The consensus recommendation is to prune during the dry part of the day, ideally in the morning, allowing cuts to heal before evening humidity increases. Confusing suckers with productive branches leads to accidentally removing fruit-bearing stems, and this happens more than people admit. Suckers grow specifically in the V between the main stem and branches, and that's where you need to look for them. Pruning determinate varieties above the first flower cluster directly reduces yield by removing genetically predetermined fruiting branches, a mistake with no solution once it's made. Not sanitizing tools transmits diseases between plants without you realizing it. University of Minnesota recommends cleaning tools with a 10% chlorine solution or 70% isopropyl alcohol between plants. Pruning late in the season exposes ripening fruit to sun damage, and Wisconsin Extension advises stopping pruning 1 to 2 weeks before first harvest to prevent sun scald. The question everyone asks is which system works best, and Cornell Cooperative Extension's multi-year research found the answer. When researchers evaluated both yield and the amount of labor required to collect that harvest, the double-leader system came out ahead. Wisconsin and Purdue Extension specifically recommend keeping the sucker directly below the first flower cluster as the second leader, calling it the strongest one on the plant. Dr. Becky Seidman, Extension Professor at the University of New Hampshire, sums it up this way. Pruning, or the selective removal of part of the tomato plant's growth, can improve harvestable yields and extend the harvest season. Keeping tomato plants off the ground reduces common fungal diseases like early blight, septoria leaf spot, and anthracnose, and improves fruit quality. Judson Reed, Extension Specialist with the Cornell Vegetable Program, adds that well-trained and well-pruned tomatoes are easy to work around, have better air circulation, optimal light penetration, and higher yields, since excess foliage is removed to focus plant energy on producing and ripening fruit. The giant tomato trick isn't some secret kept under lock and key. It's documented agricultural science, a double-leader system for indeterminate varieties, combined with consistent lower leaf removal and proper trellising. 25 to 30% larger fruits, 2 to 3 weeks earlier harvest, 5 times less disease incidence, 30% more light penetration. For determinate varieties, minimal intervention. For indeterminates, strategic pruning and consistent trellising. The real secret isn't in the technique itself, but in knowing when to apply it and when to leave it alone. And now you know.